Russian President Vladimir Putin can be taken into custody in 123 different countries now that the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for his arrest. He and the Russian official in this photo are accused of scheming to deport thousands of Ukrainian children to Russia. White House National Security aide John Kirby says it's critical that all evidence against Putin be preserved.
Of things. First, we're going to stay committed to helping Ukraine as they document and analyze and preserve the kinds of evidence of the war crimes, the atrocities, the crimes against humanity that have occurred inside Ukraine at the hands of Russian forces. And number two, that we are not going to back off our belief that accountability for these war crimes has got to be had, however long that takes.
One place Putin won't be arrested: Crimea. He's in the annexed region today for the 9-year anniversary of Russia's takeover. CNN national security analyst Steve Hall joins us now. He's also the former CIA chief of Russian operations. Steve, what do you make of this? I mean, could he ever actually be arrested? It seems at this point improbable.
You know, it is improbable right now. So this action has a lot of different ramifications, I think. First, it does send a strong message to Putin and to, the Russians in general, Russians on the streets, senior Russian leadership, and of course Putin himself, that they're increasingly isolated from basically the entire international community. And although, I will say it's unlikely that he'll be arrested, but remember, we also said it was unlikely that we'd get guys like, Milosevic, from the Serbian days, Ratko Mladic, his military commander, and yet they both ended up in The Hague eventually. It took time, but it did happen. So I'm sure that Putin is remembering those things and remembering that this is not a temporary thing that goes away after a year or two. It stays with you forever, and it'll be interesting to see how that impacts upon him, if at all, in his decision making.
It's a long game. Now, of course, the U.S. is not an ICC signatory, and neither is Russia. Does that have any effect on diplomatic relations between Washington and Moscow?
I really don't think it does. I mean, this is certainly, a bad day for Vladimir Putin, or yesterday was, and for Russia. And so that's not going to, increase any sort of connectivity or negotiations either with the United States or any of our Western allies or Ukraine. For that matter. But just because that the United States is not a signatory to this particular treaty doesn't mean that it can't assist in obtaining information, which is, I think, what Admiral Kirby was talking about there, the importance of preserving any information, any data, any proof or evidence that Putin was involved in what he's been accused of. And in that, anybody in the world can help with that, to include the United States. You don't have to be a signatory to help with the process.
Of course, next week, Putin is scheduled to meet with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, to discuss the war in Ukraine. Do you think this warrant will have any effect on Chinese-Russian relations?
Probably not at the level that we can see it, but I can tell you that I think one of the impacts that this will have, that this condemnation and this, arrest warrant for Putin is going to have, is if you're a world leader and you want to be taken seriously, do you want to be on camera publicly meeting with somebody that has been officially designated as a war criminal? That is, I think, going to be in the back of a lot of people's minds, especially if they're contemplating meeting with Russia. Now, granted, the countries that Russia and that Putin usually meet with are usually not friendly to the West. But China is very concerned over the long run as to what its role is going to be in the future. It wants to be a significant global superpower, and it wants to dominate things 25, 30 years from now. And so if somebody's got those ideas about where their country's going to go, is it really in their best interest to meet with a designated war criminal? We'll see.
We'll see. And Putin is also, of course, scheduled to attend a summit in South Africa later this year. They are a signatory to the ICC. Any chance he may be asked to attend that remotely, or do you think he'll attend and they could bring him in?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, if I were the South Africans, I would have to treat this very, very carefully. They're trying to walk sort of a middle ground. They've been supportive on Russia on certain things, but remember, the South Africans a number of years ago failed to capture an individual who was designated the same way that Putin has been designated, an arrest warrant out for him, and the South Africans received a considerable criticism for not picking up that person. So this is, again, something that internationally countries and governments are going to have to take into consideration before they have contact or have warm ties with Russia.
Steve Hall, thank you.